Hi guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging Channel. Tonight's session, looking at near infrared with amateur equipment. But before that, we're going to, of course, show off our image of the week. And I'm going to jump over there. And this week's image of the week goes to Dylan O'Donnell for his Carina Nebula. And I believe, yes, this is a 2-panel mosaic. 61 2-minute H-alpha exposures at f6.3 with a QHY9M using a 9.25 edge HD, 21 1-minute combined LRGB, and then moving on, I noticed that he's using the RASA, the R-A-S-A, the Celestron R-A-S-A, for another, don't see how many subs, maybe that's the 21 LRGB subs. But either way, it's a great image. Check it out on our website, and in the same place you can submit and be in consideration for it. And I want to say one thing. There was another great image up posted, and in the name you put the object name, and in the in the object you put the object name. So I don't know what your name is. So if you've done that, just send me an email and I'll fix it, and that way I'll know who you are, and I don't know, maybe I'll win next week. But yeah, basically I think that that is all I've got. I'm going to hand it right over to Josh. I don't hear you. You're still muted.
There we go. I was trying to be polite and quiet in the background. So tonight I'm going to present on near-infrared data. I've been capturing near-infrared data for about a year now, I think. I started last spring. There were a couple of objects that I was really interested in shooting in the near-infrared, and they were actually protostars of propylids. And I went into it not sure exactly what to expect. But I just thought I would give it a try. There was an Astrodon eye filter on sale, on clearance, and so I gave it a shot. And since then, I've been really excited and been enjoying it, been shooting a lot of different kinds of targets and kind of exploring a lot. So tonight, we're going to kind of go over some of my experiences with it and a little bit of knowledge I can pass on. Obviously, any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to answer. Hopefully, we generate some discussion. And then finally, we'll look at some of the pictures I've created with it, and we'll also look at some raw data so you can see the difference in the structure. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And I'm going to hop onto the presentation. Adam, are we all good here?
Looks good to me.
Okay, just holler if there are any questions. So the presentation will be fairly light tonight, and like I said, if we have any questions, I'd be happy to spend a little while talking about that. You know, kind of how I've been acquiring data and my thoughts on it. But so just to start off, kind of the brief overview, what is near-infrared data, or NIR data? It stands for near-infrared, fairly straightforward. There's some confusion in near-infrared and infrared, and the near-infrared data really is from 750 nanometers up to 1400 nanometers. So you are not shooting up into the far infrared and actually detecting heat from objects. As some of you may or may not know, the visual spectrum kind of tops out around 700 nanometers, and we'll visit that a little bit later, and I'll show you kind of where all that exists. But for an introduction, the near-infrared is from 750 to 1400. As I said, you're not really seeing heat in the near-infrared, but you also are not necessarily able to see what is up there as well in a near-infrared channel. So I'm shooting between 700 and 900 nanometers. Some people shoot a little bit higher if they have the right optics or the right camera to do that. But most of the amateur equipment is not going to allow you to see much beyond like 900 to 1,000 nanometers at the most. Now I was reading kind of a little bit, or I've read some about where people can see, and really people can't see much above 700 nanometers, but they've done tests where people could see all the way up to 1,050. I've done a little bit of tests just using that filter, even for example, and using bright lights and trying to look through it, and it's very challenging. There's not much coming through there, so I don't think most people probably can see much above that 700, 750, maybe even the 800 nanometer range. So moving on, this is a chart from Wikipedia, and it's actually, I'll spend a couple minutes talking about it, but if anyone wants to go over there and look at it, there's all kinds of great links, and you can kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit and learn all about all these different infrared channels. And you can also especially find out, what telescopes are using which of these channels. So, when we talk about near infrared, like the WISE survey, that has some data in this 0.75 to 1.4, I guess, micrometer range. Now, if you are talking about some of the space telescopes, then you're getting into a lot longer wavelength infrared data, and when you do that, you are actually looking at heat at that point. And so those instruments are kind of more interesting. They have to be cooled very, very low, almost down to absolute zero. And the problem is that the noise generated by the heat from the camera itself actually interferes with the image, and that's not something you necessarily have to worry about as much in the near infrared. But once you start getting up to those, the cameras have to have some pretty hefty cooling. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a little bit of a description. The other thing that's interesting is it's really hard to get much in the actual infrared from Earth, just because of the atmosphere. The water, there's some really cool studies done on basically how water absorbs these different wavelengths. And fortunately, in the near infrared, it gets through the water pretty well, actually, and sometimes even better than some of the other channels. However, once you start going up a little bit further, it does not get through the atmosphere very well. So you would need to be shooting either from very high elevation or also up in space. And you can get even further and further into the infrared. Some of the military technology is actually based on some of those mid and long wavelength infrareds. Hubble and I believe it's Spitzer are also using stuff that is far beyond the short wavelength and actually going up into the mid wavelength. And I'm not sure about the long wavelength. But so this is a really good chart to learn some from. But like I said, the stuff that we're going to typically deal with down on Earth, especially with any kind of equipment that we can use, is the near infrared up on top, 750 to about 1400 nanometers. So a lot of people talk about what camera should you use if you want to shoot near infrared. It depends both on the camera and the telescope. So I have two charts here that I will flip back and forth between a little bit. One that shows some of the Sony sensors, and one that shows some of the other one, the KAF-based sensors. Now, as I mentioned before, the near infrared that you're going to be shooting with typically is probably going to be 750 up to 850, 900 nanometers. If you go beyond that, there are some sensors you can see as 3200, and I think that I want to say QSI has a 3200, and I think maybe SVIG has a 3200 sensor. You can see that it is far more efficient than some of these other ones, such as like the 8300 and even like the 11002. They don't have much efficiency. So you're not only dealing with kind of a low quantum efficiency, but you're also going to be dealing with a lot of noise with some of these cameras. So some of them have not a lot of dark current noise, but they do have really high read noise. So, a lot of times we're living kind of more in the broadband spectrum, where you're going to have quantum efficiencies much more in the 40, 50, 60, maybe even up to 70 and 80%, depending on your sensor. And there, even with read noise, it's easy to actually beat a kind of higher read noise with your broadband data. With the near infrared data, it's not that much fainter than narrowband when you're shooting with it. So you're going to have to expose a little bit longer. But as you can see, a lot of this stuff, starts kind of coming down around that 700 nanometer range, and then some of it really goes down pretty quickly afterwards. Now, the other thing you have to be aware of when you're using these cameras is just because the sensor can actually capture light at that part of the spectrum does not mean that your telescope actually is going to transmit that light. And it also doesn't mean that the glass cover on your camera is going to transmit that light. So some cameras come with a UV IR cut filter. And when they come with those, a lot of times they will cut off very intentionally at 750, 800 nanometers. And the reason being is that if you're not using other filters, especially for color cameras, then you're not going to have really sharp focus. So, you know, to have the sharp focus, they have filters that cut the light off here. And so you may have a sensor that's going to be able to capture that data, but then that data will never actually get through your glass cover window. So you really need to kind of look at your camera, look into the specs. I know QSI has one, and I think that theirs cuts off actually at 1,000 or 1,100 nanometers. I'm not sure what SBIGS cuts off at, but you really have to find that out before you go into this too far. Otherwise, you may end up, you know, doing a lot of trying to capture stuff and getting nothing because it's being cut off there. Now, the other thing is that mirrors are going to be a lot more effective at getting this light through than optics. So a lot of times, especially if you get up past that 800 to 900 nanometer range, then your optics are going to become an issue, and you're going to struggle to actually get much transmitted through there at that point too. So I actually use, I don't have the curve on it for this here, but I actually use the Sony 814 sensor, which is what I use with my Sony QSI 690, and that is about roughly 30% in that range, and it is it's pretty good at capturing the data. And as a lot of you know, those Sony sensors have very low read noise, so I'm shooting between 2 and 3 electrons of read noise, so I'm not running into quite as many issues. Now, if you have a little bit higher read noise and a lower quantum efficiency, then you're probably going to struggle to get much. So these are some of the sensors. Like I said, that 3200 is a really good sensor. I think I've seen a couple people shoot with that 1603, but you can see that also really kind of plummets pretty quickly as soon as you get down past 800 nanometers. But it's pretty high up at the 750 range. And then obviously 11,002 is not very good for this. So moving on, a lot of people ask what filters I use. So I have not had a chance to experiment with a lot of the filters, only because I got the one and it seems to be working pretty well. But I also wanted to put a little comparison of what the broadband filters look like here for you guys as well. And that way you can see where the red cuts off and where the near infrared comes in. So if you look on the right-hand side, there's 2 sets, and I'll flip back and forth between these as well. 2 sets of filters that Astrodon offers, and I'm sure that there's other ones from other companies as well. But you can see on the right-hand side, the I channel is what's going to be your near infrared for both of these here. And you can see on the left-hand side, the broadband channel. So these are the Astrodon Gen 2 E-Series filters. A lot of people use those. I think some people use the I filters, but same thing, Astronomics, Baders, they all kind of have similar cutoffs on the top end of around 700 nanometers for the red. So when you go over to using your I filter, you are actually shooting something that is beyond pretty much any broadband data. In your Loon filter, you can also see is going to cut off pretty much at that same exact point. So part of what I've enjoyed about shooting the near infrared data is that the data that you're getting is going to be pretty much new compared to what most people are shooting. And so I'm always excited when I hear somebody else is trying the near infrared because you're not going to get that information with either a Loom or a red, green, or blue filter. So you're not necessarily seeing heat, but you are seeing reflection, and I believe that there is a helium emission line inside of the near infrared. So looking anyways at these Astrodon photometrics, you can see that the I goes from about 700 to 900. It goes up pretty quickly. I think by the time you get to 820 or 830, you're at near 100% transmission. And then the Gen 2 Sloan filter, that's the one I have, which is the I, and for me that goes from 7 up to about 860. I've considered trying some of the other filters out that have a little bit broader range, but as I said, you're not necessarily going to get much more data. So I could try that Z2 filter, and would be great. I would get something even further. But at that point, the quantum efficiency on that Sony sensor is getting pretty low, and I believe that the cover glass cuts off at 1,000 anyways. So you're really kind of fighting an uphill battle. It's sort of akin to shooting narrowband data with a DSLR, where you're trying to shoot through one of 4 pixels in hydrogen alpha behind that red filter. So your quantum efficiency is already kind of low, and then you're shooting through yet another filter on top of the filter. So it gets to be a little bit tough, and you can consider your glass cover windows sort of as filters as well as your optics, especially if you use something like a refractor, which works well for a lot of things. But in my case, I use a Tech 140 and a field flattener, so it's a triplet with a field flattener, and so you're going through a lot of glass there, and it does not always transmit very well through there. So I think that covers kind of the basic introduction of the filters that you can use, the cameras you can use, and I can talk a little bit about my experience first before actually jumping into the data. Like I said, it's not a long presentation tonight, but I want to stop. Adam, are there any questions on anything before I move on?
Yes, Josh. Wes is asking, is that cutoff at 1,000 the same for all QSI cameras?
QSI has 2 different kinds of cameras, and I talked to them. Honestly, I wish I remembered, and I can't remember, so I would contact either Tolga or someone at QSI, but they have 2 cameras that have 2 different cutoffs on their windows. Now, I believe that pretty much everyone that's going to be watching this show is using the astrophotography cutoff cover, but they do make a separate glass window, I believe, for their scientific grade imaging cameras, and I think that one may actually cut off a little bit further out, and I think that that's a different option you could get. I think that there also might be an option just for a clear glass window if you don't want a cutoff as well. But hopefully Tolga or QSI could chime in on that. Like I said, I looked into it when I made the decisions I made last year, and I believe that was the reason that I chose only to go with the eye filter, because I knew it was going to cut off pretty quickly once I got into using the other filters. But so the answer is no, not all of them have the same one, but probably most people who are doing astronomy have the same one.
Awesome, thank you.
You got it. So I will take a little bit of time now and just kind of talk through my experience with the near-infrared data, and then we'll just look at some pictures, and I'll talk some about the pictures, and we'll look at some different data sets, and you can kind of see the different structures, because that's the thing. A lot of times when I post these pictures, that's what everyone really wants to see, is what are your exposures like, how long, how many, and what does it look like compared to the other data. So my experience is the light flux is a little bit between narrowband and broadband data. So for example, it takes me about 45 to 60 minutes, depending on the night, to get my ADU value up to about 1,000 in hydrogen alpha. To get my ADU value up to 1,000 in luminance takes about 90 seconds. To get it up there for the near infrared takes about anywhere between like 8 and 15 minutes, depending on the night. So it's certainly not cutting off nearly as much light as the narrowband, especially those like 5 nanometer and 3 nanometer filters. But it is definitely not letting in as much light as like the Lume. The red, I think it takes about 3 minutes to get up to 1,000 ADU. So it's definitely letting in even a lot less light than even the broadband color ones, let alone the broadband luminance filter. And because of that, it is pretty good actually with light pollution. It definitely has helped a lot with different targets that I've been shooting from home. I have terrible light pollution, and it's so bad that a lot of times the luminance, if I'm going after anything faint, requires literally 300, 400, 500 subs to get something clean coming out of it. So it takes quite a while to capture that kind of stuff. So luminance, for me at least, for some of the targets that I shoot, has been, it has been a game changer to go to the near infrared. And we'll look at some of the pictures, and I can show you kind of what that looks like. The other things I would say that I've noticed, I haven't done thorough testing, scientific testing to get much better data, but it's definitely more tolerant of poor seeing. And part of that might just be because there is not as much sharp detail in it. I struggle to get the focus quite as sharp in the near infrared, and I believe it's because it's a fairly broad filter and the telescope is not corrected very well over that entire thing. You know, you're looking at almost 200 nanometers there, 150 to 200 nanometers, and because the telescope is already not corrected there and it is broadband like that, I can never get the stars quite as sharp as I can when I'm using luminance or another broadband filter. So, you know, a lot of times my full width half max will be down around like 1.5 to somewhere like that. Usually in the near infrared, it's going to be up more like around 2.5, something like that. So it does do well with poor seeing, though. I will say, like, I don't see as much of a difference when the seeing is really poor compared to when it is mediocre. Whereas if I'm shooting Loom and the seeing is really poor, then the data just falls apart instantly. I mean, you can see it just looks kind of pillowy soft instead of having crisp lines on it. That is not the case with the near infrared. I mean, it seems like it holds pretty well through poor seeing. It also holds well through poor transparency and kind of little thin clouds. My first experience with that was shooting at Chiefland and at the Chiefland Star Party this last fall, and it was just really, really foggy and hazy a lot of the nights, and just really hard to see. And I spent a little while shooting, you know, I shot most of the data from home for both the Horsehead and the Helix, but I did shoot some there, and it was really cool to see. I mean, you could not see, you know, maybe even a third of the stars you would expect to see on a dark night there because it was so hazy and kind of the thin clouds, but you couldn't really see a difference in the picture from when it was like that and when it was just really clear. So, you know, again, they're kind of more subjective tests, but I feel like I have enough experience to say that definitely was very helpful. Now, if you get a camera that is able to see further up, you know, past 1400 nanometers, then you're going to start running into more issues because I think that's where the water actually starts absorbing a lot more of the light. But so, you know, my experience has been that it is actually better than any of the other filters at poor seeing and poor transparency. And I think kind of another fact to sort of help back that up is that some people talk about using a near infrared filter to actually put in front of their guide camera, and that's because the star's not going to bounce around quite as much in the near infrared if you're actually filtering out all the other light before it gets to your guide camera. And as I mentioned, refocusing is definitely required. All my filters, you know, are Astrodons and they're parafocal, but they're and I don't actually necessarily have to refocus. You know, I still have offsets, but they're pretty much insignificant between my narrow bands and my broad bands. And I'm shooting at f7, so I'm a little bit slower, so you might expect them to be parafocal, but that's not the case with the near infrared. I am moving about 50 to 60 steps with my focuser to actually get that to come into focus, and I mean, I can definitely see a difference of probably 1 to 1.5 arc seconds in the full width half max when I do that refocus. So, you know, I've eventually got to the point where I'm using offsets, but for a while I was trying to focus through that, and it was really needed. I didn't realize that. I think I went a few weeks before, you know, a few weeks of shooting and just wondering why everything looked so soft and out of focus before I figured it out. So I would not attempt shooting that without doing some refocusing, whether it's an offset or just focusing on that filter. So moving on, you know, talking more about the targets themselves, you know, I've had a lot of luck with almost all the targets I've shot in near infrared, but I've also gone out of my way to sort of be pretty selective in what I'm shooting with it. You know, the only target that I would say that I did not see a very appreciable difference or enough data to use it was the Flame Nebula, and that might just be because it is just so overwhelmingly bright that I couldn't really see anything different. And that went for every filter, for that matter. I mean, the Lume filter, the Hydrogen Alpha, even the red filter. I mean, they all pretty much showed almost exactly the same structure in it. But everything else really, so far, at least for me, has gone pretty well. I've done well with some reflection dust, like in the NGC 1999 region. That also has some bright molecular clouds there, so that came through well. Same thing as both M42 and Horsehead region, and I'll show you some pictures of those. Now, I was hoping that maybe this would be an opportunity to figure out how to get IFN from home. I have not got that yet. I am still going to keep trying. There's a couple regions where I was excited and I thought that I might be able to get it out, especially like around the Snowball Nebula, but I did not see it in there, although I do know that the IFN there is very faint, very diffuse. So I think that maybe the next targets I will try them on probably will be something around M81 and M82, partially because the IFN is so bright there compared to a lot of the area, but also because I have not done any experimenting with galaxies actually yet. I've done pretty much only protostars, propylids, planetary nebula, and some big bright targets like M42. So my experience is that usually the structure is pretty different. There are some targets where it is significantly different. There are some where it's you know, not quite as different, especially I would say the Horsehead, the near-infrared and the Horsehead was very different. And we'll look at that picture and then we'll look at the data too to compare it. But it was you know, much more focused around the actual inside of the Horsehead and much less on the background. Bright planetary nebula, they show similar structures, but I have seen different. I've now shot the Ghost of Jupiter with it. I've shot the Saturn Nebula. I've shot KGPN8 and a couple other ones as well. And they are similar. And again, I think part of that is especially in the core, they're so very bright. But there's just enough difference between you know, the near infrared, the hydrogen alpha, and the luminance that you can, when you use it to actually create colors, you know, you can get a little bit of different color scheme, especially in the planetary nebula. And that's kind of why I like doing it. I like that I can show images kind of, you know, in a different light, so to say, than a lot of times, you know, the way they're presented typically, you know, when you're looking at pictures on Astrobin. And so you know, that's kind of how I just always enjoy shooting images. I like trying different things out that haven't been done or haven't been done really well before. Another thing is that the star fields are very, very deep on them. There are countless stars, and I didn't write this, but also countless background galaxies, especially the little faint ones. They just pop up everywhere. So almost all of your images that you're going to shoot in near infrared are going to be dominated by stars. They're going to be dominated by background galaxies. And you know, they're really going to pop through much more so than any other filter, and shockingly so. And it's actually pretty cool when you start combining the near infrared data with other data. You know, I'm a guy who actually likes starless images and always likes to focus on the dust more. I mean, you can see the background of this PowerPoint presentation. But anyone who knows me also knows that a lot of pictures that I do are starless, or you know, really kind of tone the stars down a lot and focus more on the picture itself. However, there's a lot of people who really enjoy the stars, and there's a lot of interesting things that go on, and there's a lot of stars that you can see in the near infrared data that you will never see in any other channel. M42 was definitely a special case for that. You could see even down in the core dozens of stars that just didn't show up in any other channel. Now, because of that, when you're combining the data, there is not a super effective way to combine the near-infrared data with broadband and get a real natural look without tone mapping it. I think that I've tone mapped probably every image that I've done with near-infrared data, just because if you try to put those stars into the image, and again, a lot of people will like this, you're going to get a lot of really kind of red and gold stars, especially if you're using it in the red channel or the green channel. Now you can assign whatever channel you want to it, just like with narrowband, but if you're looking for a natural look, you're just going to get stuff that's dominated by that kind of gold star look. And it's very cool, and it's definitely something that's very different, but that will you know, very clearly be what dominates your image, is if you don't take care either to really reduce the stars a ton, but also just to, you know, not put a ton of color into that near infrared channel. So, you know, whatever you like, that's kind of, you can deal with it whatever way you want. So I'm going to pause here because after this I can share some of the pictures I've taken, and then we can jump in and look at the data. But I want to see, Adam, if there's any other questions before we jump into that.
You know, one question I might as well ask you, it got spelled out a little bit in chat, but For someone who came in a little bit late, is near infrared a filter in addition to RGB, or is it something different?
So for the near infrared, I'm using a near infrared filter. Near infrared is just we can go back to that slide real quick. But near infrared, is data that comes in from 750 nanometers to 1400 nanometers. Your average amateur equipment is not going to see much beyond 900 nanometers, maybe up to 1,000. We've done some shows here where we've discussed other cameras that are available, and there are some where you can see a little bit further, but they get more expensive very quickly. They're not necessarily made specifically for the kind of astronomy that we do, so it can be pretty challenging to get those cameras to work, aside from being able to afford them. But yeah, so the near infrared is just, it is data, or it is a section of the spectrum that you can see here that goes from 750 nanometers up to 1400. Now, some companies like Astrodome will actually create different filters that are in the near infrared. So you can actually use some of these different filters, shoot all in the near infrared, and get a color image from it. And I think that's something that's not that uncommon for people to do. I know that some people have tried that out, some with good success, some without great success, but you can see here that there's a handful there that are up above that 700 nanometer wavelength. You can use the I, the Y2, I believe, is another one, and the Z. And so I think that a lot of people will do images with the I, the Y, the Z. Now, sometimes a sort of typical mix, and I'll show you a blend that I did as well, is that I believe like the wide field survey, I think a lot of times that they will do a green channel, I'm sorry, they will do they'll do I, which would be near infrared, and then green and blue, something like that, or some other combination of those channels. But a lot of times that's what they'll do. Instead of just doing red, green, blue, they'll use the infrared maybe in place of the red channel. But so yes, infrared is a spectrum, or is a part of the light spectrum there at that 750 to 1400 nanometers, and there are multiple filters you can get in there. And I've found the most success with the one I've been using, which is the eye filter. Does that cover that?
Yes, next question. What kind of research do you do into target selection, specifically for near infrared, or is it mostly trial and error?
So the research that I've done started off by picking one target that I knew that I really wanted to shoot, and I'll just hop to it right now, which were these protostars and propylids. I believe Eric ended up joining me on these as well at one point on, I don't know if we ever collaborated, but I know he tried to shoot them. These are what kicked off my decision to go with near infrared data. I saw these targets that were pretty small, but not so crazy small that I thought they were beyond the range of my telescope. I have really steady skies down here, so I can get things that are really small and get pretty good details because the skies are steady. And what I was excited about was that the reason that I hopped on this is that I've looked, and in that wide field survey, they use that same eye filter. I don't know if it's that same exact eye filter, but they use an eye filter that has the that same part of the spectrum covered. And that's one thing that's nice about some of those photometric and Sloan filters, is that they are consistent across all companies usually, the wavelengths that they're using. And so I saw this data in the wide field survey because I saw a target that I was really interested in. So then I went in, and if you go into that wide field survey, you can select any filter you want and look at the actual data. And so when I did that, I was really excited to see that this target in particular, before I moved on to other targets, actually showed these low propylids and protostars kind of popping off the screen away from everything else. And I'm really excited because I knew it was an HA dense region, but to have the image look cool, you're going to need to get something that kind of differentiated those little propylids a little bit, and that's what the near infrared did. Now, when I processed these, I certainly was heavy-handed on kind of the sharpening and getting these things to pop and really saturating that near infrared channel. So there's a little artistic license, but that is where the data was, and that's what it looks like. You know, what a propylid protostar usually is it's a star that's really early in its life cycle, or just being born. And what a typical protostar like that will look like, and oftentimes like a big hero object might look like that as well, is that it's going to have sort of a head with a bright region where that new star is being born, and then it'll have sort of a comet-like tail, and that tail usually comes from a star actually, the dust around it being blown away. So you can see in this image there is actually a star that's a little bit brighter just out of the field that is actually blowing these. I can't remember what the name of this region. I think it's the OBG region, Cygnus. And there's a, you know, it's a heavy star forming region, and there's a lot of solar wind, I believe, that's actually blowing this stuff and breaking these clouds up. But you can see in these specific targets that really kind of pretty finite structure of a bright head and that kind of cometary tail blowing behind it. So that was how I got started and really interested in doing this, was this one specific target. I got the filter on clearance. I think maybe it was $100 or $150. And I was like, well, if this works out, that'll be awesome. Then maybe I'll try some other stuff. And if it doesn't, then it's too bad, but at least I'll have known that I can't do it. And really, you know, this was a lot of data. I think this was one of several 100-hour projects that I've done over the last couple of years. And in the spring here, we get really long, clear stretches of great data. So I shot both HA and near infrared, I think, almost every day for about a month straight or something like that. And I was really able to get some pretty great structure out of both the near infrared and the HA in these. So moving on from that, some of it is, you know, just kind of shoot and see what comes out. Now, if the target's really bright, I know that there's going to be something there. There's going to be a question of how much difference there is in structure. But then also you can, like I said, the big thing is reviewing targets and then reviewing them, you know, with some of the pro data and just seeing what they got. I mean, because a lot of them will shoot with that eye filter, and a lot of times they're not shooting with sensors that are way more sensitive in the near infrared range. They might be able to go beyond the near infrared range and be sensitive as well, but they're not necessarily more sensitive in the near infrared range. They are using huge telescopes, so you're going to have to make up for it by getting a lot of time. But that's the best way that I know to do it, is I look at targets. You know, you kind of try to understand what's going on in the target and whether or not there will be near infrared there. So, you know, pure emission targets, you know, pure HA targets, or sometimes those old really diffuse planetary nebula are not necessarily going to show a lot of near infrared because you're not seeing the hydrogen alpha. I mean, that's one thing to keep in mind, is that the narrowband data that you will typically be shooting, you know, you could shoot LUM at a planetary nebula, and you'll get a lot of data, because a lot of times you're getting hydrogen alpha and oxygen and sulfur and nitrogen in there, and all of those lie within your luminance filter. When you're shooting this near infrared filter, none of those lie within it. So if you're shooting a really faint narrowband target without any kind of reflection cloud or anything like that, you're probably not going to see a lot of near infrared data. So keep that in mind. You're looking for reflection data. You're looking for, you know, young stars that have little dust clouds around them, and stuff, you know, that isn't just gas usually. So this is the one that got me started. I'll click through to some of these other ones. So I talked about planetary nebula. I shot this one recently, which was the Ghost of Jupiter. Now, there's some interesting stuff going on here. I am not sure if there's IFN in this field, or just kind of some molecular gas. But so the near infrared on this showed really great in the core of the Ghost of Jupiter. And then there was just sort of some faint, big kind of blotches of haze of near infrared, which looked like they might be reflection, because I saw some of that in the red as well. And now I'm not talking about the big hydrogen alpha cloud down on the bottom, but kind of more on the top left and the right. That's where some of that near infrared and actual red data was coming in. So there may be some reflection dust kind of in this region. But the core here was definitely very sharp. I don't have a close-up here, but you can look this picture up on Astrobin and see the near-infrared in the core of the Ghost of Jupiter is very cool. And it definitely did show the structure better than any other channel that I shot. I shot lots of short exposures in luminance, and broadband, and hydrogen alpha, and the near-infrared definitely came out with a lot more of a distinct kind kind of ring than anything else. So this one was cool, and this is a cool way of actually, I went for a totally natural look here, assigning the oxygen to the blue and the green, and the hydrogen alpha and the near infrared to the red channel. So I was able to get, kind of a real natural looking field for the dust and the gas here, and then just overlaid red, green, and blue stars. So I like doing the natural look a lot. I do that with a lot of the images. Not like the previous one where I just really kind of focused on getting the near infrared data to pop. But here's another example of one where I was able to really kind of do a much more creative color scheme on the Horsehead. And as I mentioned, the near infrared, we'll look at the different channels in Pics Insight here in a few minutes, but the near infrared in this target really, there was a lot inside the Horsehead here. When you shoot hydrogen alpha, a lot of times what you're seeing is the dust behind, or the hydrogen alpha behind it, all that gas behind it, and the Horsehead itself really looks kind of like almost like a black hole. And part of that is because there's dust in the way of the actual hydrogen alpha data there. So, if you're shooting in luminance here, sometimes you'll get a little more kind of focus inside the Horsehead as well. But the only problem is when you shoot luminance, you're also getting a lot of hydrogen alpha in there. So if you're trying to do something like this target where you're trying to get the Horsehead itself to pop more than the background, then and you shoot luminance to do that, then the luminance, like I said, is also going to have hydrogen alpha. So they're kind of combating each other, and you're getting more hydrogen alpha as you're getting more luminance, so they're going to kind of spill on top of each other. So this one was one that I was definitely excited about. Everyone knows that really famous picture that Hubble did. Now that was a little further in the infrared, I believe, but you can find with that Hubble data that they do have an eye filter as well, and their eye filter has some really, really amazing details in it. It's not quite as striking as the really famous one, the Horsehead in a different light, but it is cool. And the Hubble one, you can see the little galaxies in the background and stuff. And I really, really was hoping to see some of the galaxies through the Horsehead, but I did not see that. Although I was not disappointed with the picture. So in this one, you can see a little different blend. If you shot this, then hydrogen alpha kind of dominates above the Horsehead. So as you might guess, in this one, the hydrogen alpha is actually assigned to the blue channel. And in this case, I put near infrared on the red channel, and then I did a green plus blue for the green channel itself. And so, once in a while, you can kind of get lucky and just slap the colors together, and you get something like this, which is a much more psychedelic look, sort of, which I liked to do something different. But the other thing, it wasn't just to get really pretty colors. It shows the different structures really, really cool in this one. And the structures were very different in this field. Like I said, a lot of times for brighter targets, especially with targets that have both narrowband and reflection stuff going on in it, then you can get to some really exciting images. And I have a lot more on my Astrobin page, but I think I have one more here for you. Yeah, M42. Now, M42 is very, very bright, especially down in the core. But again, the structure was a little bit different. So I was able to kind of show M42 in a different light as well. And this one, I went for more of a natural look. I think that I combined the hydrogen alpha and the near infrared and the red channel all into the red channel. And then I also combined the near infrared, the pseudoluminance, and the hydrogen alpha into a larger kind of super pseudoluminance, I guess you would call it. In that way, I was able to show all the different channel structures. So the pseudoluminous and the near infrared and the hydrogen alpha really all had pretty distinctly different looking fields. And we'll look at, I have that one ready to look up at in Pics Insight as well. So again, I mean, you can do all kinds of different things. It's kind of like narrowband data. If you want, you can go nuts with a color palette like this or like this, and just really kind of play it up. If you want to go natural, I mean, it's certainly pretty close to the red channel. It's one step above it, so you can give it kind of more red designation, or combine it with your red channel and your hydrogen alpha and get something that looks very natural as well. But that's all I have for the, yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dino would like a better idea how to identify your first target there, the proto stars. I think that in Cygnus.
So I will pull up the official designations. The one that you see on the bottom right is GLMP 1000. And I can never remember the names of the other ones, and you will see why in just a second here. Am I still sharing my screen, Adam?
Yes.
So I will pull up my my Astrobin page, and we can go down and look at these targets. So this first one is IRAS 20328 plus 4042. And you can see this field of view. I guess it didn't solve on this one. This field of view is tiny here. I believe this one might be something like 10 minutes by 10 minutes on this one. Now, if you, let's go to one that actually solved here. Let's see if the larger one solved. Yeah, so this larger one solved right here. And as you can see, there's one star, I think, that it recognized in the field. But this is the center for these targets. It's in Cygnus. I want to say that it is a little bit west of Satyr. So it's kind of just outside of Satyr. And I believe, I believe maybe that I have a link to a picture that kind of shows where it is relative to everything else. So let me see if I can pull up the description. I do not have the description here. Let me check one more picture here. Let me check that first one and see if it's in there. And if it's not, then we can pull it up. Here it is. So this picture right here, I think, will show a wider version. Yep. So here we go. So this is one that I just created just to kind of show where that is in Cygnus. So you can see here's the Satyr region right here. Right up here is the Pelican and the North American Nebula. So it's basically just this kind of real dark void right in the middle of all that stuff going on. And the crosshairs there I made to be, I believe those crosshairs are about the size of my full field of view on that large zoomed out image. So hopefully that helps kind of show the perspective of where it's at.
I think so. And also, I think you said we're going to go into Pics Insight and see some comparisons of RGB.
Yeah, luminance, hydrogen alpha, and near infrared. Yeah,
Great.
We can do that for a couple of minutes.
In the meantime, Wes is asking, why did you choose the Sloan I2 filter over the photometric IC filter?
Because it was on clearance on Astrodon's site before I knew if I was going to enjoy doing this or not. And that was really about it. It was kind of a whim thing when I wanted to shoot these targets. Like I said, it was on clearance, and so I thought I would give it a poke and see how it goes. And they both covered a very similar range, so there wasn't a lot more reason other than that.
Have you ever tried shooting any variable nebula, T-Tauri, or Herbig-Haro objects with it?
I have seen some Herbig-Haro objects. I'm trying to remember what target. BDB one. This is the one we did, Adam. I collected just a little bit on that last year. BDB 152.
Yep.
Yeah, 152. I shot that. I don't have that data with me, but I did shoot that. It came up pretty well. I want to say it was in the hydrogen alpha as well, and it did not look way different. It looked slightly different. It was just a little bit softer, but I didn't go very deep on it. I was just curious to see. Another target that I shot a little bit of was the Eagle Nebula, just because I saw the data that was, I believe it was the wide field survey again, and I saw what the eye data looked like there. And for those pillars of creation, you could definitely see more stars behind it, even in the eye data. So I shot a couple. That's one that I think I would like to work on this year, just because it definitely looks a lot different. So I have not shot any variable nebula with it. Discussed shooting Hubble's variable nebula with that, and maybe I'll get in a couple shots of that this year before it's too late. Although I think there's probably only about a month left. To this point, I've shot. I can pull up the Astrobin page, and so anyone who wants to look at the near infrared stuff that I've shot My name is Josh Smith on Astrobin, and I'll just kind of go through here real quick and let you know I've shot the smiling lens, the gravitational lens, in near infrared. I shot M42, KJPN8. Here's M78 I shot with near infrared, which also looks very different. I shot the Snowball, WE237, which was a little tiny planetary nebula. That one did not show much in near infrared. I shot the Flame Nebula in near infrared. I shot Saturn Nebula. Here is the Running Man. The Running Man was very cool. The structure in the Running Man was very different with the near infrared data. Go back and show. I shot the Helix as well. And the Helix Nebula was interesting. It was very different, although it was not way different than the red. And I think that might be one that I have in Pics Insight that we can look at as well. So that one I shot near infrared, HA, and O3 was the combination for the super lume on all of this. And I want to say that those were it, other than the propylids.
All this
Coming down here.
All this under city skies. What's your light pollution?
My light pollution is pretty terrible, and most of these were done from my home. Like I said, I mean, to get to 1080 EU takes maybe 60 seconds in my lume, depending on the night, between 45 and 90 seconds. This was shot from my driveway at home. M42 was shot from my driveway from home. Everything here was shot from my driveway from home. Coming down here further, this was at a couple star parties, and the Helix Nebula was from Chiefland. But everything in these two rows right here were shot from home, all the way up to M42, and then again with the Ghost of Jupiter. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a red-white zone. I moved recently to a place that's just very slightly darker, but it's still definitely solidly a red zone. And as I mentioned, if whoever asked that wasn't there earlier, the near infrared definitely helps me battle the light pollution a lot. So for example, on M78, I don't think I have that channel on here, but on M78, the data was very, very different in near infrared compared to the super lume of the red, green, and blue. And this picture definitely required near infrared data to get it to come out well.
And Bob T has a comment. He gets a very strong halo-looking ghost image when using the IC filter. Maybe an artifact from the cold mirror in the ONAG. And I don't know. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that from several people that sometimes they get some really nasty halos. I want to say that James on Cloudy Nights was getting some really nasty halos as well. I think he was shooting with the ASI 174, I believe, or maybe it was the 178. Now, maybe that's just that filter, or it could be the on-axis guider. I'm not sure, but I guess I'm not sure why that would do that. Is that on that beam splitter? Maybe it has trouble with that.
That's what I'm wondering. Is the beam splitter cuts off the infrared, and what does it send to the image camera? So you're losing signal there.
Yeah.
And then it might come down to like the way the signal interacts with the beam splitter.
Yeah, it certainly could be. And the other thing, like I said, is I mean that when you start getting up above a certain width, now I thought it was above the IC filter, but optics have a hard time with the near infrared glass optics. I think that, you know, if you're going to be shooting anything else, and most near infrared stuff works a lot better with mirrors than with glasses. So I could not shoot any further anyways, because my telescope wouldn't be transmitting the light well any further up in the spectrum.
All right, Bob saying with an ST 8300.
Yeah, and again, we looked at these curves a little bit. I believe there are a couple other people that I've been talking to have tried to start shooting with the 8300. You can see here the curve. I think we said that filter starts at about 700. You know, you're starting at 35% quantum efficiency and going down to going down to about 15% quantum efficiency over that range. And that, I would guess that camera probably has 8 to 10 electrons of read noise. So, I mean, it's going to be faint. That data is definitely going to be faint coming in there. Very few of the targets were very strong for me in the near infrared. So they took time, definitely took some integration time to pile up to get much out of it, more than rich star fields anyways.
Think you're caught up on the questions.
Cool. All right. Well, let's hop into Pics Insight, and I have a handful here, and then we'll take any more questions that come up after that, and then we can be done. So here, I'm just going to open these, and actually, what I'm going to do is blink through some of these targets so that you guys can actually see the difference in each of these targets. So this one is the Running Man. And I think that I just showed everyone the Running Man here. There we go. So here is your hydrogen alpha channel. Here is your luminance channel, and here is your near infrared channel. So as I said, I mean, the structure is just really different in some of these targets, especially, you know, everything in Orion, just really cool in near infrared and very different. Again, hydrogen alpha, luminance, near infrared. So one thing we talked about in the near infrared compared to the luminance and the hydrogen alpha is just look at that star field. I mean, they're everywhere. There's probably, I don't know that it would be an exaggeration to say maybe 5 times as many stars in that. I mean, go hopping back and forth between the luminance and the near infrared here. You can just see a really striking difference. But the other thing that, like I said, that's cool is that the clouds are kind of soft and they feel a little more transparent with the near infrared. Now it's not because you're seeing through, as you would think with like infrared, where you're seeing through stuff quite as much, although you are seeing some of these stars. It's not because the, how do I want to say this? It's not because you are necessarily seeing behind dust. It's because a lot of these stars are sending out light that are in that part of the near infrared spectrum it is more dominant. And so you're seeing a lot more of the stars because of that. And so they're actually coming through. So a lot of the data, you know, that's coming through on your luminance is not necessarily way different than your hydrogen alpha. So again, you know, I can blink through these a couple more times for you guys, and then we'll look at another target. But that's just the straight luminance. That's the hydrogen alpha, and here's the near infrared. And one thing that's really cool is looking over in this region, and this was part of what I was so excited about when I created this image. I think what I'll do also is pull up this image so you can see how I ended up combining all of these. One thing that I thought was really cool, now these are all flipped from this one, is all this stuff, kind of the details in this region here. And if you look at the difference in the near infrared and the HA there, you can see the HA's got all kinds of details, but then the near infrared also has kind of a lot of little smaller details in here and different dark dust clouds and stuff. And so that really allows you, when you combine them with those different structures, to just get something very cool, and you can kind of get a unique presentation compared to a lot of things. Now, if you look, not comparing the near infrared and the HA, but the near infrared and the luminance, you can see that there's usually a little more similarity between the luminance and the near infrared. Now, they're not exactly the same. I mean, obviously, you can see kind of some of the dark, or the more of the folds in the clouds, and some of the stuff going on outside of the Running Man in the near infrared here compared to the luminance, but also over here in this region where the luminance is just kind of almost a soft, featureless bulge. The near infrared has all kinds of little funky stuff going on. Down in here, you can even see there's lots of kind of long streamer clouds and everything, and even up in here, there's a lot more detail in that. So there's a lot of cool stuff to see in this region. So we'll pull up M42 now, and I can show you some of the different stuff in M42. And the difference in these are also quite striking. If anyone is interested, they can contact me. I'd be happy to share any of this data if they want to look at it. I already have it loaded up to Google Drive, so we can share that and get everyone to take a quick peek at the difference. So everyone knows this M42 picture is actually a 4-panel mosaic. So each of these here is actually a 4-panel mosaic. So I have the HA, the luminance, and then the final color. So we'll just kind of blink through these here. So here's the HA. I'm sure everyone's kind of pretty familiar with what the HA of M42 looks like. Luminance is a little bit different. You can kind of see like the clouds around the outside are not as rich on the luminance, and then the stuff down on the bottom, in between M42 and the running band, what we were just looking at in the previous one, HA's got all kinds of detail. Luminance kind of showing more of a featureless blob there. And then if we go over to the near infrared, you can see there's, again, a lot of kind of unique structure. Now, this still had a good bit of data on it. I don't remember exactly how much it had, but it was a good bit. But you can definitely see quite a difference between the near infrared and the HA there. And so let's see if we can zoom in a little bit down in the core, because that's where things got a little even more interesting, or between these images. So again, there's the luminance, and here's the near infrared. So you can see on the near infrared and M42, there's all kinds of stuff going on down inside this core here. Really different in structure. I mean, if you look at all of the structure up here, all these little folds and everything, they're much different between these two channels. And that's even for a very bright object. A lot of times bright objects, it's a little bit harder to distinguish in the channels, kind of some of the features. But the other thing that's really striking immediately is the star fields in these. I mean, if you look at, that HA is very deep. I want to say that there's probably 10 or 15 hours of data there for a really bright area. And just hopping back and forth between the NIR and the HA, you can just see the difference. I mean, there's just countless little stars in this little region in the NIR, and almost none in the HA here. Even in the luminance, you don't really see any of them. So there's a whole part of the near infrared stuff that I haven't even got into looking at as much, which is the kind of the fun stuff you can see with the stars. But you can also see a lot of the difference here. That's a little bit blown out, but you can kind of see a lot of the subtle differences in the dust here. So a lot of really interesting things. And as you can see, a lot of people, one of the main questions is just, does the structure look a lot different? Well, a lot of targets, it really does look a lot different, either both from the lume and from the narrowband. And that's why you can use it to kind of create more striking images like this M42 here that I did, the starless version here. All those to make a super lume can really do something kind of pretty interesting. And I think I have one more loaded up, ready to go, that I can share with you guys.
And Josh, we have a question about what's the relative light transmissivity of NIR versus RGB or narrowband. And I think what he's asking is, what is, if you're taking 30-minute narrowband exposures and 5-minute RGBs, what are you taking your infrared in?
Yeah, so typically I'll be shooting the broadband. My luminance will be, I just shoot 5-minute subs at home all the time, and the reason that I shoot 5-minute subs is because I have such bad light pollution that if I shoot to expose properly, I will literally end up with thousands of images. But as I mentioned, to get to 1000 ADU to kind of to equalize or normalize everything, a luminance would be between 45 and 90 seconds. A near infrared is between 8 and 12 minutes, and a hydrogen alpha 5 nanometers between 45 and 60 minutes. So if you want to talk about the transmissivity, I would say it's something on the order of, my near infrared is not quite 10 times weaker than the broadband, which is not quite 10 times weaker than the narrowband.
Cool. And would near infrared record fainter stars than luminance given the same exposure time? Basil is looking for the best way to go deep with the given exposure time.
On stars specifically, yes. Yeah, that definitely the stars show up a lot more in near infrared and fainter stars and stars that you normally can't see. And we can see that again here with M78. So this is the one I was talking about where I shot from home, and equal integration time. Here's the luminance in the near infrared kind of side by side. You can see that the structure is actually different, even in the dust somewhat too, but that the star field is just dramatically different. So if we zoom in here to the core even a little bit more, flip back and forth between the near infrared and the luminance. Here's the luminance. I mean, I can count the stars here real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, maybe 20 stars. And then if you hop over to the near infrared, there's quite a few more and quite a few fainter stars. So if we zoom back out just a little bit, you can also see the difference kind of in the dust lanes here. They're not wildly different, but there's definitely different structures. Here you can kind of see the waterfalls coming off of the core of M78 here. This little dark area up here has a little bit of difference in the structure. The bright region up here has a little bit of difference in the luminance, and then a lot of the stuff over here in this region was a lot of difference between the near infrared and luminance, and obviously the HA. The HA, if anyone shot this, it's a pretty faint target, especially trying to shoot it from red skies, red or white skies like I did. But the near infrared definitely, I mean, that came through sort of like a strong luminance channel if you're at a dark site. And just hopping back and forth. I mean, this is kind of why I like using it. You can see the difference. I mean, again, shooting from my terrible light pollution, it's just, it's pretty cool to be able to get something like this that's not a narrowband channel coming off of your camera. So those are all the ones that I had preloaded ready for people to see, just because they showed some pretty nice striking differences, both in the star field and the data. And like I said, if anyone has any other questions, I have all those pictures on Astrobin that have any near infrared in there. I've got that data somewhere, so I would be happy to share it if somebody is interested in looking. But again, you know, the reason I presented tonight is that I like doing things different, but I also love seeing when other people try out new things. You know, my hope with this is always that you know, I think when I got into it, I don't know that I knew anyone who was trying to shoot a lot of near infrared stuff, and my hope was kind of getting into it more, that I'd see more and more people trying to shoot more targets and kind of present new things. So I'm excited, and hopefully this show tonight will get more people to try out different things. Maybe boost the near infrared sales for all of our vendors.
Alex is asking how you show the ADU in Pics Insight.
In Pics Insight, I guess it wouldn't be ADU, it would be on a 0 to 1 scale. And you can see down here,
K value.
The K value. My cursor can only be in one place at once. But yeah, so I mean, now M78 is a little different because this entire field is full of dust. I mean, I think that, I mean, the only thing for the near infrared anyways, or the HA on this, that is not full of dust, they are dust. It's the dark dust stuff. But so this is a very bright region. Luminance, you know, obviously the dust is there, but not nearly as much. But so for, you know, if you want to see what the values are here, you can see, you know, these are all sort of normalized to each other as well, so you can see the difference. But so when I'm talking about ADU value of 1,000, I'm saying something like in SGP, when you're bringing in an image in 16-bit format, you know, you're going from 0 all the way up to your roughly 65,000, and so, you know, my typical exposure, I'm trying to get between 1,000 and 2,000. I'm usually happy between 1,200 and 1,500. And 1,000 is something where I'm definitely clearing the read noise, so I know that when I'm comparing exposures that I'm getting real data there.
Josh?
Great. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Did you ever look into what actual emission lines you're getting when you shoot in near infrared?
I did. I saw that there was helium, I believe. One of the helium lines is in the near infrared, and I don't remember if I saw any other ones. That was
right? There are two emission lines. There's 668 and 706, right? Okay. I was just curious what we're actually seeing when we're looking in infrared.
I think, well, when you're looking in infrared, it's a lot different. When you're looking in this near infrared, I think that you're still seeing mostly reflection dust.
Oh, it's okay. So it's.
I think it is mostly reflection here.
So
now the stars are different because the stars, I think you're getting a lot of different emissions from the stars themselves. But for the actual dust and stuff, it's almost all reflection.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, Adam?
I see Alex. Alex is saying your 1,000 value. Where do you measure it and how? And I think
that's where you're in SGP.
Sequence Generator Pro, right?
Yeah, you just like if you're an SGP Pro and you're looking at the image as it just came down, you just stick your cursor on a dark part of the scene, or where do you get your or do you go to the image statistics part of SGP?
So it depends on the target. If I'm shooting something that's really bright and full screen, the full target, my full field of view is full of dust and bright stuff, then I will try to look for a dark part of the sky. If not, and like you said, if that's what I'm doing, I will move my cursor there and look for an average, in the dark part of the sky. However, for a lot of images that aren't like M78 or M42, where most of the sky is background, then I will just look at the mean for the entire image and the image statistics. If you're not using SGP, you might be using nebulosity, and nebulosity has image info, or I can't remember what it is. There's a little info panel that can show you the mean or average of the whole image, and you can also get an average where you put your cursor. I presume also that like Backyard EOS and I know that APT has that as well, image statistics and info, and you can also look at different parts of the screen. If you're transferring it into CCD Inspector or Deep Sky Stacker or something like that, you can do the same thing as well.
Alex, did that answer your question? Because
Yeah, it's I set my ideal exposure by looking at the background of an image, and for my particular sensor, 8300, I want it set to about 1300, and that's where my read noise swamps out the background noise. So it sounds like you're doing about the same thing, except that you're using an average exposure. Using the statistics off of SGP or various other places, and that's you use the average of the whole image.
Well, and the honest answer is that I don't even do that right. I just use 5-minute subs, so I don't take too many. If I'm out at a dark site, I'll probably take 10-minute subs, and if I'm at home, I take 5 minutes and sort of blow out my image. But I'd rather have 300 subs than 1,500 subs or something like that. But yeah, ideally, you can do something like use the average of the whole image and shoot for an ADU value between like 12 and 1,500, which will beat the read noise.
Alex, I don't know if you saw what popped up in chat, but they're explaining how to do it in Pics Insight. And basically, you can do it with statistics, or if you want to change that K value to the actual ADU value, use the arrow, click integer range, and then 16-bit, and then all of a sudden that K value is showing you the ADU value. If you want to do it.
I want to ask a question here. Wouldn't this depend on the camera? I mean, I had a camera at one time. I believe it was a Kai 11,000.
Yes. Definitely,
so,
because
when we say a 1,000, we should specify what camera it is that goes.
My bias is 1,000 on my 8300 by SBIG.
Right. Well, so when I was talking about 1,000, The question was asked, what is the relative transmissivity of everything? So I don't shoot for 1000 ADU. I was just mentioning that to get to 1000 ADU, these are the different exposures that I need. So it kind of gives just a way to normalize between, just to kind of show how long they have to be to achieve the same thing. But yeah, it's definitely going to be different for different cameras. Different cameras have much different levels of bias, much different levels of read noise. So, it's going to be specific to your actual setup.
I don't know if you are you using a light pollution reduction filter for your luminance? Did you say that at one point, or?
I experimented. Yeah, I experimented with that for a while. And it was interesting. It worked. It did work well on some targets. The problem was with so many of the targets that I shoot that it actually cut out a lot of the light that I cared about, and so I went away from that. But for some targets it worked well. There were some galaxies where it did a really good job. I remember the what was it? The Pleiades actually came out really well. And just so people know, I was using the CLS CCD filter as my light pollution in place of the luminance. And the reason I was using that is because my light pollution is so bad that I wanted to cut out as much light pollution as possible. And I know a lot of people say, wow, that filter gives you color balance issues. Well, it only does if you're shooting with a one-shot color camera. If you're using that in front of your red, green, and blue filters. But if you're using that in place of the luminance, it's not really actually going to affect your color balance at all. It's just going to cover the, it's going to affect the structure of the light that's getting through. So it won't have any effect on the color balance really.
And one more question, would near-infrared and CMOS be of use for planetary, cloud feature enhancement, Mars, dust storm, etc.?
That's beyond my area of expertise. However, I do know that a lot of people are using CMOS filter or CMOS cameras with near-infrared filters for shooting planetary stuff. I mean, I know that that's happening in cloudy nights, and I think it's also pretty common for people to use near-infrared filters when they're shooting planetary stuff, at least for Jupiter. But again, I think I shot a planet one time 5 years ago, and that was it. So I would pass that on to somebody who knows more than me.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it.
I think, I know I did. Really interesting what you're getting out of Yes.
I've got to tell you all, somebody made a comment, I think it was Sal, that said that he wanted to see more Pics Insight tutorials from Josh. And Josh, we really should invite them all up to Big Bear on Memorial Day week.
That would be fun.
Everybody on the Astro Imaging channel wants to join us out in Southern California. Josh is going to be doing a big workshop at RTMC Astronomy Expo on Sunday, May something, whatever.
28th.
Sunday, 28th, is it? Okay, it's Memorial Sunday.
I hope so.
You better. We'll talk later. But if you want to come see him and visit with him and see what he's like in real life, and it is quite a thrill, you come on out and you'll have a good time. So he'll be at Big Bear. RTMC Astronomy Expo is the official name of that. And you can contact me. You can go to RTMC Astronomy Expo and register to see Josh in person, live, etc., etc. Thanks, Adam.
No problem. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Josh. I do want to remind everyone, next week's session, full frame guiding and focusing, and it's going to be presented by Gaston Baudat from Innovations Foresight. So you guys got some cool stuff. That's going to be a really cool presentation. But I do, again, thank you, Josh. Great presentation. Really great images.
Thank you.
So anytime we get you on, we're happy to have you on. And hopefully you're watching. Hopefully you're watching the chat, because you're getting lots of thanks from there. All right, guys. Well, good night, and we will see you next week.